So formally, I'd like to welcome you all to the September 2024 meeting of the Metropolitan Study Group of the SRIA. My name is Sheen Towers, and for a number of years I've been the Director of Studies, and I've had the pleasure and the privilege of hosting these online meetings. And welcome to you all. We have a truly international group of people here, and it's really, really lovely to see you all. I'm personally really looking forward to today's talk and presentation from Frater Robert Mayo. And the title of Robert's presentation today is Synchronicity, Messages from Another Dimension. And I'm very intrigued by the title, and I'm very much looking forward to this. So do you need me to give you any screen sharing options, Robert?
No, I'll just be reading, Gene.
Okay, that's fine. So just give me a moment, and I'm going to pin your camera to the main part of the screen for the purposes of the recording. And over to you, Robert. All yours.
Thank you. Synchronicity, messages from another dimension. Background. Over the past 65 years, many events have occurred in my life which to me seem connected in some circumstantial way. Circumstantial events which have no rational basis and which cannot be explained away by pure coincidence. C.J. Young used the term synchronicity to describe circumstances that appear meaningfully related yet lack a causal connection. I therefore think that synchronicity may be the closest description of the connected and circumstantial events described in this paper. I have decided to focus on synchronicity, although the role of providence must be worth exploring. This paper describes just 4 sets of events. But first, I need to tell you a little about my Welsh grandmother, or Nana as she was called in the family. She was the daughter of a farming family and was born in the same part of North Wales around the same period as Dion Fortune. I have no way of knowing if my Nana knew Dion Fortune or was a member of some kind of esoteric group, but she certainly seemed to be different from other grandmothers that I knew, but didn't wear it on her sleeve. From a young age, I was always very close to my Nana, who spoke Welsh, and trusted her instinctively. My Nana was a very wise woman who believed that a poultice or drawing ointment, or one of the many potions she brewed up from the wild flowers and plants which she grew in her garden, could cure many physical ills. I often stayed with my grandparents in their home in North Wales. During one night, I remember hearing through the wall my granddad moaning in the next door bedroom. I was too young at that time to suspect anything of a sexual nature and was upset to think of my granddad suffering in pain. The next morning, I found out to my surprise that my Nana had been beating him during the night with a bundle of freshly cut nettles to cure his rheumatism. She would often talk to me about nature, and I never doubted what she told me. 2 non-synchronistic events in which she was involved started to awaken something deep inside me. The first concerned an outbreak of warts, which occurred in my junior school. I guess I must have been around 9 at the time. Virtually everyone in the school suffered from an epidemic of warts, typically all over the hands and fingers. My mum took me to the doctor, who prescribed several treatments, but nothing worked. One day, my Nana took me to one side and gave me a procedure to follow strictly at a specific time of date and under specific celestial conditions, during which I had to rub a certain organic substance into the warts. I now realize that what she was instructing me to carry out was a form of magical procedure, which I did to the letter. Within days, the warts had started to go, and my hands and fingers cleared up completely in a couple of weeks. I cannot detail here what I had to do, as my Nana had told me that I had to keep it to myself, Audi, Vidi, Tace. The second was in my early teens, when my nana taught me how to divine for water, dowsing. I remember using a Y-shaped twig, but cannot remember what kind of tree it came from, possibly not hazel. The physical reaction to detecting underground water was very strong, and in those days easily repeatable. I have not tried to dowse in recent years, but have a feeling that the ability may no longer be there. I suspect that my nana's words may have subtly but strongly influenced my psychological development over the years. The synchronicities. Event 1, Belgium and Eurovision. My dad raced pigeons as a hobby, sending them to compete in races to fly home to Manchester from points as far away as Rome and Barcelona. The best racing pigeons in the world are to be found in Belgium, which has often been referred to as the Mecca.
Yes.
Sorry? Am I okay?
Apologies, Robert. That was somebody who had unmuted themselves.
Okay, but you can hear me okay?
Yeah, very clearly.
Great.
Carry on, please.
The synchronicities. Event 1, Belgium and Eurovision. My dad raced pigeons as a hobby, sending them to compete in races to fly home to Manchester from points as far as Rome and Barcelona. The best racing pigeons in the world are to be found in Belgium, which has often been referred to as the Mecca of pigeon racing. To illustrate this, in 2020, a Belgian racing pigeon was sold to a Chinese pigeon fancier for £1.4 million. My dad went to Belgium regularly to buy what he would call crack breeding stock from the cream of the Belgian pigeon lofts. During one of his visits, he formed a friendship with a Belgian pigeon fancier called Gustav Swalens, who bred very successful long-distance birds. Gustav had a son, Willie, the same age as me, 14. The two dads thought it might be a good idea to introduce us to see if we might be interested in setting up exchange visits. Willie and I quickly became close friends and remain so to this day. I am godfather to his son. I spent many happy holidays in Belgium and greatly liked the country and its way of life. I often thought it would be nice to live in Belgium, but never in my wildest dreams did I once think that might happen. When I was 18, I joined the BBC as a trainee broadcast engineer based at Alexandra Palace in London. For those overseas of you, the BBC is the UK Broadcasting Corporation. Towards the end of my first year, my management called me in and said that the Eurovision Broadcasting Union's Eurovision Technical Control Centre in Brussels were looking for a junior engineer. He said that he had seen on my CV that I spoke French and German, prerequisite for the job, and asked if he could put my name forward. I must admit that I did not show any special enthusiasm as I was studying for the end of year first exams at the BBC College, but must have acquiesced to my name going forward. Some weeks later, I was called for an interview by the chief engineer of the European Broadcasting Union, and a few days later was offered the job. I went on to spend 6 happy years living in Belgium and working in the Eurovision Technical Control Centre in Brussels, including mixing sound for the first of the Eurovision Song Contests. A teenage daydream come true. Did unseen mechanisms work to put in place the events which would lead to my living and working in Belgium? Event 2, Eurovision and Vince Vacker. The Eurovision Control Centre coordinated and controlled the international distribution of broadcast material over a worldwide communications network. These were mainly audio news transmissions in the days before satellites enabled video to be carried. Eurovision at that time was funded through the EBU by the main national broadcast organisations such as the BBC in the UK, ORTF in France, ARD in Germany, the RAI in Italy, and many others. Every summer, one or more senior engineers from these broadcast organisations would spend a couple of months in the centre in Brussels to familiarise themselves with the workings of the operation. One summer, Vince Baker, the chief engineer of the American broadcaster NBC, came over, and he and I formed a friendship. Over the subsequent years, we had frequent contact over the Eurovision International Intercom system, and he said that if I was ever in New York, to call the NBC switchboard to meet up. I never really thought about it, as the Eurovision junior engineers did not travel. Vince told me that he lived in White Plains in New York State, a city of 1 million people. 3 years later, I left Eurovision to join IBM in Paris. 18 months after this, IBM sent me on a mission to the USA. On arriving on a Saturday at JFK Airport, I picked up a car and drove up to White Plains in New York State, where IBM have a facility, and checked into the White Plains Hotel. I planned to call Vince via the NBC switchboard on the Monday. On the Sunday afternoon, and at a loose end, I decided on a completely crazy whim to drive around the White Plains suburbs on the ridiculous off chance that I might spot Vince. I took off, and after 20 minutes or so was driving down a leafy side road when I spotted Vince mowing his front lawn. I had no prior idea of Vince's address, nor in which part of White Plains he lived. You can imagine his and my surprise. Did unseen mechanisms work to put in place the events which would lead to my seeing Vince at his White Plains home? Event 3, Milan. In 1975, I left IBM to join a Los Angeles-based internet pioneering company, which had decided to put its European headquarters in Milan, Italy. In the November, I flew out to Milan for an initial induction, during which they took me on a short trip by car to see the flat which they had arranged for me, which was south of the city centre, and which I was due to move into in early January. The short trip to the flat in the Via Gentilino, the road it was in, took a route well to the south of the city centre. We spent maybe 15 minutes in the flat and returned directly to the office. At that time, I spoke no Italian and also had no idea of the shape or topography of central Milan. Just after New Year, I drove down from Portsmouth to Milan, arriving on the northern outskirts at rush hour. The Milan traffic was manic, and as I had no real idea of where I was heading, I decided to follow the Centro Città, city centre signs for a while, and then to stop to ask for directions in the hope that I would find someone who spoke some English. Finding it impossible to pull over, I ploughed on through some very heavy and scary traffic as something told me to just keep going. Eventually, maybe from exhaustion, I decided to stop and found to my amazement that I was in the Via Gentilino, where my flat was. The only other time I had driven myself through the centre of Milan was back in 1963 when returning from a camping trip to Yugoslavia, so I had no current idea of how the city was laid out. Did unseen mechanisms work to put in place the events which would lead to my driving directly to my new home? Excuse me. Event 4, Yvette Cooper. For the benefit of our overseas participants, may not know that Yvette Cooper is a leading member of the new Labour government now in power in the UK. Event 4, Yvette Cooper. My late wife and I had different political views, but were not completely ideological. When we saw a politician being interviewed on the TV, who, on rare occasions, actually answered the questions being posed, we were sometimes impressed with these rare moments of candour. We would often say to ourselves something along the lines of, well, that was a breath of fresh air, and speculate on how good it would be to just bump once into the said politician in the street to give positive feedback. Of course, this kind of thing never happens. On the 21st of January of this year, I watched the Laura Kuenssberg Sunday show on the BBC, where again for the overseas participants, it's a major political chat show on the BBC on a Sunday morning. so I watched the Laura Kuenssberg show on the BBC, during which she interviewed Yvette Cooper. Even though my politics are different, I was very impressed by the interview and sat there thinking how good it would be to just once be able to bump into someone like her to give positive feedback. 2 days later, on the 23rd of January, I attended the Metropolitan College in London. After the festive board, I made haste to catch my train and went down into Green Park Station. Entering one of the narrow tunnels leading to the platform, I saw Miss Cooper about 15 feet ahead of me. I could not see any close protection, so I rapidly caught up and said to her something like, quote, "Miss Cooper, I saw you on the Laura Kuenssberg show on Sunday, and I think you were brilliant, and I'm a Tory." I got a broad smile and I was gone. Did unseen mechanisms work to put in place the events which would lead me to bumping into Yvette Cooper so soon after seeing her on the television? Reflections. Reflecting on these 4 synchronicities, plus the many, many others that have occurred over the years, I find it impossible to see coincidence as the cause and speculate that some form of invisible transmission of information may have taken place by some as yet undiscovered means. For example, electromagnetic waves, of which radio waves are a part, pass unhindered through space and can pass also through some materials. Excuse me. They are invisible and mostly undetectable by the human body, except for certain wavelengths which can either heat the body or damage cells. Distance is no barrier, and radio waves from a distant source, for example, a powerful transmitter on Mars, could be picked up by a simple combination of just 4 metallic and metalloid components. This used to be called a crystal set. Recently, the University of Warwick has led an international team of researchers which has discovered elemental metallic copper and metallic iron in the human brain for the first time. So I speculate, are there types of information transmission as yet undetected that can interact directly with the human brain? Quantum science seems to be opening up radically new lines of thought about information transmission, lines of thought which I find impenetrable, such as information transmission between quantum particles entangled at great distances. Where did the colossal insights and intuitions of alchemists such as Isaac Newton have come from? Could alchemists have injected metallic vapors from heating up materials such as mercury in their retorts? Were these metallic substances facilitating some form of information reception, enabling them to tap into another dimension when working in their laboratories? I do not personally have the intellect, know-how, skills and experience, or the mathematics to pursue these wild speculations further, but live in hope that one day someone will find the answers. I believe the Nobel Prize-winning quantum physicist Werner Heisenberg said, quote, "Not only is the universe stranger than we think, it is stranger than we can think." And the Nobel Prize-winning quantum physicist Richard Feynman said, quote, "I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics." Finally, W. Kirkman Nolte, an eminent Freemason, Kabbalist, member of Quatuor Coronati, author of The Way of the Craftsman and many other valuable papers, said, quote, "There is no such thing as an accident. There is much to be discovered." Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Frater Robert. And I'm just going to switch the view now on here to the speaker view and unpin your image so that we can open this up to comments. And I already have, I'd like to invite you, if you have comments or observations that you'd like to share, then if you could please raise your hand via the reactions tab at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And we have Brig with your hand up. So over to you, Brig. Are you there?
Thank you, Shane.
Go ahead.
Robert, I'm absolutely buzzing with your presentation, with the question that no such thing is an accident. I know it's a Jungian thing, but I, without going into detail, share much of your life experiences. And looking at it from a Masonic perspective, do we not all seek for that which was lost? What is that which was lost? And your little story about warts, and I've got to relate my experience. When I was 7 or 8 and being brought up by adoptive parents that were old enough to be my grandparents, that there was a knock at the door by gypsies. And I was obviously appearing under the skirts of my adoptive mother. And this gypsy said, "Oh, my poor dear, look at this soul. He's got all these warts, da-de-da-de-da." Cut a very long story short, she said, "I will cure him of that." And these horrendous things on my arms and my elbows dropped off within a number of weeks. So what I'm saying, my question to you, Robert, is you mentioned the ability of dowsing. But why do you doubt your ability to douse after all this indication of synchronicities, dear brother? Embrace it. Please respond to why do you doubt your ability?
You know, I have no rational reason to say that, but it's such a long time. I guess the passage of time, I guess it's a bit like when I was younger, I used to love cricket and I was a bowler, but I think if I tried to bowl now, I'd probably dislocate my arm. And I wonder if we lose if these things atrophy with the passage of time. That's the only real reason.
Thank you for that, Robert. Please do pursue this and have belief. I honestly believe, rightly or wrongly, that we have all, both male and female, that this knowledge which we have lost. And what we seek is a reconnection. And what you have spoken of at length about synchronicity is the message that the universe is sending us in that journey to reclaim that which was lost.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brig. And we have Thurston with your hand raised. Go ahead, please, Thurston.
Hi, Robert. Question for you. Do you experience synchronicity in duplication of events and numbers and associate them with being symbolic of being on the right path?
Sorry, I'm not hearing you very well, Thurston. Sorry.
I'll get close to the microphone. Do you experience synchronicity in the duplication of events and numbers and associate with them with being symbolic of being on the right path? For instance, seeing the number 12 and then suddenly you're seeing 12, 12 everywhere, 10, 10 everywhere, and see them as a sign saying I'm on the right path, or any other duplications, or you mentioned coincidences, and see them as being symbolic, as being you're on the right path, you're doing the right thing in life.
Yeah, I need to think about that. That's very interesting. I think I certainly think that happens. Yes, yeah, I certainly think those signals come along. I just mentioned 4 events, but there've been many. But I think these signals occur at moments which are, if we are awake to them, then are meaningful.
Do you see them as synchronicity as well, part and parcel of the bigger?
Yes, I do. Definitely. Yes. Yeah.
So I also believe there's no such thing as coincidences.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I chose 4, and some of them are very personal. But I mean, there's a definite pattern there in terms of if you want messages coming through.
Have you ever thought about learning ways to recognize coincidences when they happen and being aware of them and really pay attention to them?
I haven't made an effort to do that. I try and stay awake as much as possible, but I haven't. Apart from which I didn't. One thing I didn't include in the paper. What I experience I experience very strong tingling on different parts of my skull. Sometimes when I'm, if you want, receiving messages, and I intend, hopefully in the near future, to try and correlate how and when and where this tingling occurs with messages coming through. But I haven't done that work yet. That's something that I plan to do in the next 12 months.
Thank you very much, and great lecture.
Thank you very much. I want to comment on that. The point you raised about certain numbers, for instance, as indications that we're on the right path. A number of years ago, I visited Assisi in Italy because of having a strong love for St. Francis. And I went at a time when it was in the middle of January and there were hardly any tourists there, which was wonderful. And there are, in a number of the chapels and the churches there, they have these huge paintings, very old paintings depicting certain scenes. And there's a theme that runs through these paintings where in the sky, out of the sky, there is a hand pointing down like this, representing the hand of the Almighty, as if to say, "Oi, you down there. Yes, you." And I have had so many experiences where there a particular number combination that has deep meaning and significance for me has popped up at incredibly relevant moments. And whenever that's happened, it's felt like the hand of God just saying, "Yep," if you follow what I mean. So I personally, I'm really glad that you asked your question there, because I personally can really relate to that. And I wonder if other people also may have had similar experiences. So Kath, thank you. You've got your hand up. It's lovely that you're here, Kath. Over to you. You need to unmute yourself, please, Kath.
Okay.
There we are.
Thank you to Barry for inviting me along, and I like the quantum physicists' quotes, and I just wanted to add my favourite quantum physicist quote, which is from Schrödinger, he of the famous box and cat problem. He said, "The number of minds in the universe is 1." And I agree with the person who said we're all in search of something that we've lost, and that I interpret as being the unity of this oneness, this one mind. That's what we're searching for. That's what we're trying to get back to. And I like the tale of the intuitive driving as well. That reminded me of Dirk Gently, the Douglas Adams character. He's a private detective, and when he has to get in his car and drive, he doesn't bother to check the route. He just follows the car in front, and he always gets to where he's meant to be. And it's I'm enjoying this discussion. I'm enjoying this conversation, and thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Kath. Brig, you're next. Over to you again.
I'd like to add to Kath's comments. I think this unity of one mind. It occurs to me, and I've mused, rightly or wrongly, that we all know everything. The problem is we've forgotten, and we are searching for a methodology to recall that which we have forgotten. But I would ask Robert this. Robert, do you think that these experiences that we've had with synchronicity, does it mean that our life experiences are predetermined in so much that we are provided with an opportunity in this incarnation to search for that which has been lost?
That's a good question. I think it's way beyond my level of competence. I understand the question, but I really don't know the answer to that. Being very frank with you.
Well, thanks for your honesty, Robert, and maybe, just maybe, that is one of the purposes of our incarnation at this time. And you know, I've listened with great interest to the examples, just a few examples of the synchronicities that you've mentioned, and I've come away with the impression that none of this is by accident. And I look at my own life experience, possibly from the age of 6 or 7, right to the age now of 82, and I think, hang on a minute, this is beyond coincidence. So what's your impression of, is it beyond coincidence?
I think it's definitely beyond coincidence. I mean, as I said in the paper, I don't know what the mechanisms are, but there must be something must be happening, which is on. I think a two-way process. I think possibly we send a signal into the, let me call it the ether, that we need something. In the case, if we take the case of Vince Vacca, when I drove up to found his house in White Plains, somehow our intellect sends a signal into the ether, and that signal gets picked up. I mean, it sounds incredible, but if you try and think of it in cold terms, how does it happen that I end up driving just down the right road to where the man lives? There has to be some kind of connection which has taken place between my thought processes and something on, or let me say, on the other side. And that's why I mentioned quantum entanglement, which I don't really understand. I'm not competent in quantum physics, but I think the concept there is that there can be connection between particles over vast distances, which are not explicable in terms of normal day-to-day logic.
And dear bro, I'm sure you would agree, such experiences actually change your whole spiritual perception forever.
Definitely, most definitely. Yeah.
Many thanks for that.
Thank you very much again, Brig. And Boris, over to you.
Yes, Brig, I would like to share a personal experience. It's a little bit personal, but a lot of souls on this call I feel very close to, and I feel I'm in a kind of secure environment, even though this will be published. But I think I was inspired by Robert, who admitted that he's sharing something very personal. So I think and by the way, my father was a quantum physicist working on entanglement theory 30 years ago. So that's another synchronicity. Now, what I wanted to share with you is that some of you know, at least my brothers from the college, that I had a very serious COVID illness a couple of years ago, and I was in hospital. I was vaccinated, wearing a mask, but I did get a nasty virus. I was in hospital for a month, out of which 15 days on a mask with 15 liters of oxygen, which meant that I had a very high dosage of oxygen in me. By the way, I'm a many year meditator. I do yoga. Of course, I love anything esoteric, but because my parents are kind of university professors and scientists, I always kind of wanted to look for the scientific explanation of any phenomena. But on my own practice, I was always ready to go deep into the esoteric. On the other side, I'm a big believer in the concept of Gnosticism, meaning knowing something, not really believing, but knowing once you've experienced. So I think, Brig, what happened to me, I think universe sent me a very interesting experience because after these 10 days, and I will not go into much detail, I think we'll have a chance to chat. Maybe I'll do a paper on this one time later. I did experience something I would call an enlightenment because my ego was absolutely crushed, and I was left nothing more than a thought, completely locked in bed with a mask, not being able to sleep. So I had a vision out of all avatars of Jesus Christ, which is another thing because I wasn't baptized by that time, even though I was part of the SRA. I was a Christian, but I wasn't formally baptized. After that, I did, by the way, which is also an interesting point. And I think I'm coming to the point of my story. In the days following this enlightenment, when I was still in bed, and then another week when I came home, I absolutely felt I was floating in a I would say not dimension, but in a matrix just above the now. So I was in the now, but I was a little bit just as if you are floating in the water, so you can see up and you can see down. So I was fully present here, but I somehow had an awareness of glimpses of what was just above. And in those 2 weeks, and I come to my point, everything was connected. So the colors had a meaning. And I think to a previous point from a brother, the numbers were connected. There was so much symbolism in the numbers, in the symbols. I was seeing things which were connected all the time. So there was absolutely, and this is again a Gnostic approach. It's not scientific. It's not believing. It's what happened to me over a period of 2 or 3 weeks. And my wife of 35 years, she said, if I didn't know you for so long, I would freak out because I was literally walking through, I was mostly at home because I was still recovering from COVID. I was very weak, lost 10 kilos. I was still receiving treatment, but at least I was at home. And I was there, so I wasn't hallucinating, but everything was connected. And the takeaway from that period, and I'll close here, not to take too much time, was that actually when you're a little bit above, everything is perfectly connected. It's the one mind principle that Kat mentioned. But when you go down, and I did eventually, I'm much more kind of in the ego these days after these years, then you're saying as if somebody throws an object into the water and you just see it coming into the water, you say, oh, that's interesting. These two things are connected. But when you're up there, it's obvious that somebody threw them away. So I just want to share a very personal story, not to be believed or anything. I just want to share because we're all kind of quite deep in this matter. And we kind of, I think the whole point is to share these experiences, even though it's a little bit kind of embarrassed to be so open. But I feel, again, as I said, comfortable in this group. I did come out of it in a way, which is a little bit unfortunate, but if I stay there, I wouldn't be able to function. I would definitely have to like stop working. I would have to stop, family was, a little bit of a challenge. How would I have 2 daughters, I have many businesses, I'm a international businessman, consultant, I'm a coach, I have, many relationships. I just couldn't function normally because all I was doing, I was going through the day, seeing all these beautiful connections and everything was so easily organized, as the founder of Aikido, Morihei Ueshiba, said when they asked him about Aikido, which is a beautiful martial art. I think Shane and I discussed this before. He said, when I do Aikido, I'm just rearranging the universe. I'm just putting things in order. So I just felt in that layer up there, you're just moving things so elegantly, and there's no conflict. Nothing cannot be solved. There's no uncertainty. There's no chance. But I think if I wasn't able to have a sneak in that level, I wouldn't have been able to kind of. So I love that I'm hearing all these inputs, but I was a little bit lucky to have had that experience. Thank you for bearing with me.
Boris, thank you so much for sharing all of that information, and I'm sure that a number of us can relate to what you just said there. And yeah, any comments, Robert? Please go ahead.
I listened to that with interest because I went through a near-death experience about 50 years ago, where I had the last rites and was supposed to go but didn't. And some of the things which were said, I can definitely relate to. But that's a topic for another time.
And do you connect that experience with the lecture that you gave us today? Are you somehow saying that because of you? Because I feel, because I had my experience, I'm still very open to kind of, somebody was mentioning, when you hear that voice in your head, before I would want to, in a meeting, I would want to say something. And as I open my mouth, somebody walks in, somebody spills a coffee, something would happen. And before my ego would say, oh, come on, just get, let me say, man, let me speak. But today I learned from the first to say, that's my angel telling me, just shut up. Or it can be something else, right? So because of that experience, I'm so much more sensitive to these points. And my question is, have you linked your experience, your near-death experience, with what has happened to you in these synchronicities later on in your life?
I don't think so, because the first of the synchronicities involving the waltz, if you want, or not, sorry, before first involving Eurovision was before that happened. So I think it was, part of me wonders if what I experienced and went through wasn't triggered by the state of mind I had before that happened. It's difficult to say. I've tried to think it through, but find it difficult to put all the pieces together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again there, Boris. And Kristen, over to you now. Hello, are you there, Kristen? Okay, maybe Kristen will come back soon.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, can now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
My life has been, I really much enjoyed your talk, first of all. And my life has been literally since birth full of synchronicities. It feels to me that, particularly with some people, we're more susceptible to this, but, for me, dimensions are so interacting. It just seems like sometimes with me, I get memories of previous lives, and it's like I'm watching a movie. I can literally see and hear them, particularly with Egypt. So, yeah, I just think this is a very interesting topic. I won't go into any of mine because they're also involved, but yeah.
I think it's a topic that warrants much more deeper and structured investigation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. Alexis and everybody at the Atlantis bookstore, over to you. Are you there?
You might have to get closer to the.
I suddenly felt like it was a bit like a seance then when I said, "Are you there?"
Sorry, can you hear us now? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you really clearly and see you. Thank you.
It's a fascinating subject for me. I can just quickly relate to the numbers. Many times, a certain sequence of numbers appear just randomly throughout the day as to whatever I'm doing. And for me, I just feel I'm on the right path. Where they come from, I don't know. But it's the same time that comes up on the clock that makes me look at the clock. And I don't know why I do, but I do. It's just something personal to me, really. I'm trying not to be superstitious about all this, but I'm also I'm having lessons with AMOC, and they talk a lot about this with different energies. So it's something that's very, very real. That I can't really go into detail about it all, but yeah, it's. I don't think they're accidents. That's for sure.
Thank you very much. Any comments there, Robert?
No, I can share. I mean, obviously, as I said in the paper, there's no such thing as an accident. This is triggering all this feedback, triggering all kinds of thoughts in my mind, because I need to try and explore this in a more structured way. At the moment, I'm experiencing these things without any kind of rational approach to try and logically examine how, when, and where they come from. I think that's something that I must look to do over the next 12 months.
Thank you, both of you. I'd like to share something briefly as well. So if there is no such thing as coincidence, and therefore this, I feel, implies the notion of divine orchestration, that there is a benevolent intelligence that moves us around a little bit like chess pieces on a chessboard. And in certain ways, at certain times, people are brought together for specific reasons, and those reasons can be at that time completely unknown, and yet years later it becomes so obvious that that meeting was orchestrated in I would say in a divine way. And I'll share this experience briefly. A number of years ago, I was, so for me, my faith has been an integral part of my experience of adult life. And that has always been very, very strong and very constant, thankfully, except for one particular period where there was I was about to do something that would have very strong and deep implications for me about the direction, the course of my life. And just before making a journey which would lead to this experience, something happened to me that really caused me to question my faith. It's the only time in my entire life where my faith has been challenged really strongly. And that morning, my wife said to me, she understood what had happened. And she said, you know what, you need to go and find a place, sit yourself down somewhere and pray. And I thought, right, I'm going to do that. And I went off. My intention was initially, I'm going to go to St. Paul's Cathedral. And I went there and that just didn't feel right. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to go to Covent Garden, to the Actors' Church behind the piazza at Covent Garden, which I knew. That didn't feel right either. And I was kind of wandering around thinking, I'm looking for some kind of sign, some kind of indication that I should be here. And this is where I need to be in order to pray. That's how I felt on that day, on that morning. And wherever I went, that was not it. And I got to the point where I gave up and I thought, well, that's it. I'm not going to make that journey. So I'm just going to go home. And I walked toward Leicester Square tube station. And when I arrived at the tube station, there's a particular entrance to Leicester Square tube station where there are two staircases that go down on opposite sides like this, and then you funnel into the tube station. So there I was in my own thoughts, and I walked down the stairs slowly, feeling very, very low, very, very low. And who should walk down the stairs, the opposite side at exactly that moment, but Frater Alistair Lees, who is known to many of us. And it was literally that very same moment. And we saw each other and it was like, oh, Alistair, what are you doing? And we stood inside the tube station and we had a little chat. And I said, so what are you doing? here at this time of day. And he shared with me he'd been at the Atlantis bookstore speaking with Geraldine. And he asked me what I was doing. And I told him I had been having a very challenging morning, and I'd gone looking for a particular place to pray, and nothing had felt right. And I was just about to go home. I said to him, I've given up. I'm going to go home. And then he shared with me, he said, you know what? My wife goes to a church not far from here, and I'd never heard of this place, the Notre Dame Catholic Church, just off of Leicester Square, literally just off of Leicester Square. And it's a circular church. I don't know whether any of you have been there. It's a circular building. And he said, why don't you go there? And so as he was speaking the words, there was one of those billboards that the electronic ones where the images change all of a sudden. And what it changed to was an image of the Lion King. So this lion just appeared at the side there when he said this about this church. And I thanked him, and I thought, wow, okay, I'm going to follow this. And when I arrived at this church that I'd never been to before, like I say, it's a beautiful circular church. And above the altar, it was this huge tapestry of a tree, like the tree of life, with birds and animals all around. And in the center of the tree is a woman, like a feminine archetype in the center of that tree. And it spoke to me so strongly. I sat there for a few hours, and I wept and I wept and I wept with joy, because it was like it reaffirmed to me that it was right that I made that journey the next day. And in a certain way, if I hadn't have made that journey, if I hadn't have had that synchronous thing happen to me, it's quite likely I wouldn't be speaking with you now, and I wouldn't know the people who I've come to know through this. And so, yeah, I just thought I'd share that with you. But that was, so divine orchestration, I believe wholeheartedly, the timing of that Alistair doing his thing, he left at a certain time that seemed completely random. But for me, it was absolutely meant to be. It was totally and utterly purposeful that we met at that time, and that he shared that specific information with me. And I will always be grateful to Alistair. He was a messenger from the divine for me at that time. So anyway, there you go. Any comments, feel free. Otherwise, I can hand over to Barry, if you'd like to go ahead, Barry.
Yes, it's absolutely, absolutely fascinating. The synchronicity of being on the right path, which Thurston mentioned in terms of numbers. There were so many tangents coming from this subject buzzing in my head. It's a bit difficult to pick out which one. I certainly think it relates to the quantum field, where energy goes where attention goes, and so it's a sort of like co-creation between the divine speaking through onto this plane and playing out for want of a better word, a plan, but also a personal experience. And so I think that when we start making attention, it starts to bring out this as into alignment with that particular quantum line, that anything born of a time will play itself out like a conversation. And we're experiencing this right now, this synchronicity about being on a particular path. And for the last 3 years, I've been following a monthly ceremony. Cass written about it in her books, where we mark particular astrology, lunar cycle every month. And the month passes through 4 particular signs: Libra, Scorpio, Capricorn, Sagittarius and Capricorn, which have a numerical value. And what I've noticed, particularly this year of this sequence, is the numerical value of those 4 signs in accordance with the English Kabbalah, for anyone who's interested. But those numbers are reoccurring continuously, to the point, this particular journey that I felt drawn to go on to the American West Coast and to various sacred sites there. It was so synchronous that I had a friend from here who said, well, I'm going to be in Mount Shasta when you're there. This was quite random. And when I arrived there, they'd organized everything for me, a place to stay, a vehicle, and so on, that made the journey flow. And consistently, the 6-week experience was very, very much had the quality of beauty triumphant and gratitude and love. So much love in this particular journey. And what kept cropping up was the numerical value of those 4 signs. Over and over again, a car would pull in front of me with 418. I'd look at my clock to see when the train was arriving. It was 418. And then quite randomly, I was invited to go to somebody, to visit somebody. And I said, what's the number of your house? So he said, 418. And the person happened to be a Scorpio, which was the astrological sign that's the moon's involved in this particular sequence of discipline. And I thought, well, this is rather fascinating that it's indicating to that I'm on a particular initiatory timeline relating directly to the astrological ceremonies that I'm on. And I'm sharing this with these particular sequence with 2 other people here in New Zealand, and quite independently, one of them said, I keep looking at my clock, watch, and it's 418, and they're having exactly the same experience. And also, one of the people who's following this path has just gone on a journey at the same time as I did, but they went to Australia, and they said, "Oh, it's been amazing. I've had this most wonderful experience," and described exactly the same, energy field that I was experienced. Even to the point they said, I met this Aboriginal shaman by coincidence, and to say that coincidence indicating a particular timeline that we're going on, which you mentioned earlier, and the numerical values following. What I find interesting is that it's not just, in this particular example, it's not just happening to me, but it's happening to the 2 people who are also following this particular ceremonial sequence through the year, which is astrological. And then I look on the divine is speaking through our life journey, and when you look at astrology, that each of us, the astrologers of us, will look at our birth chart and discern our path from the celestial bodies, and you say, well, our personality is an expression of those particular bodies at that particular time. So I've sort of gone slightly at a tangent there, in so much that I'm looking at the quantum field, that anything born of a time has the quality of that time. So whether it be ceremony or wherever our attention is going, slots us in to the sort of multiverse and takes us along that path. So I feel from a magical perspective, as a pilgrim, it's really important to be discerning on what path we particularly choose and what field we want to go. Do we want to listen to discordant music, or do we want to listen to harmonious music? Because be careful what we choose. And I think for what it's worth, that's my sharing. Thank you.
Robert, over to you. Any comments?
It's a lot to take on board. It's made me think about the synchronicities. I was trying to think about some of the attributes, and it's occurred to me. It's only just occurred to me in this conversation that all 4 synchronicities involved some level of desire, and I just wonder whether desire in our amazingly complex brains, whether desire is something which can lead to signals being sent out into the, let me call it the ether, which can elicit responses, because something must be happening. But as I say, I haven't thought before about the element of desire. And I will try and plot that in the future in the many events that occur.
Thank you very much, Robert. Kath, over to you again, please.
Thank you. Just a few comments that have occurred during the course of the discussion on the numbers. As an English Kabbalist, I do numbers. I have a digital clock that's not at the right time, and I look at it, and it's not going to tell me the time, but it will give me an interesting number. And a lot of the time, I get the same numbers coming up. And I think these sorts of synchronicities, these ones that are like omens or portents that we're on the right path, or good omens, I think they're very like the things that the ancients would look for, having sacrificed a chicken or some poor animal. They would note what birds came flying over, or what natural event occurred shortly thereafter. And if they saw eagles, they'd think, there's the divine flying over, and the symbol of Zeus or Jupiter or one of those sorts of gods. And they'd say, we've got the right idea. We can invade today. And so I think synchronicities as omens, it's not a modern idea. I think it's a very old idea. And I'm reminded of the verse in the Bible, which I can't quote, but the effect of it is that even the falling of a tail feather from the tail of a sparrow is something that's ordained by the Almighty, which I think is an incredibly moving, emotionally moving concept. Nothing happens by accident. Nothing is random. Everything has a something that we might call a purpose, or something that we might call a reason. It's all interconnected. And I think this, if you pursue this idea, you get onto questions about free will. So I'd just like to bung my 2 pence in about free will before we get there. And that is that we have free will to choose our view of reality. And that's it. What is going to happen is going to happen. Whatever our story is, that will be the thing that plays out. Whatever the conversation with our astrology is, that is the story that will be told. What we have free will about is how we view that. We can view it as a catastrophe, as a disaster, as all the will of God, the working of our astrology, our karma, or just a random series of random events in a completely random universe. It's up to us to choose our attitude to the reality in which we live. And I think it touches quite closely on magic as well. The point about desire. The speaker desired to get to the bloke's house or a particular place while he was driving. People argue endlessly about desire and intent and purpose in magic, and how important is it when you perform a ritual that your intent is at the forefront of what you're doing. It's a big subject, and nobody can quite agree whether it's all about the intent and the desire, or whether it's about the timing, or whether it's about having the right words and the right magical equipment. Oh, different things. And thank you to Barry for bringing up the English Kabbalah, because I was going to do that and it saves me the bother. That's it.
Kath?
I just remembered one impressive little bit of English Kabbalah. The English Kabbalah is based on the English alphabet. The 26 letters have their own numerical values. And if you add up quantum, it has the same value as spirit. I'll leave that with you. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you very much, Kath. Brig, you have your hand up again. Over to you.
Can I just say a couple of things about
go
Kath?
ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Kath has resonated. So many things resonated there. First of all, at the Kabbalah Society summer school in September, at one point the leaders took us for a walk through nature to point out various things. And Joe Brown, who's one of the people who lead the organization, asked the question was, how does nature know what to do? And that really raised all kinds of questions in my mind. I think it's a phenomenal question, because is nature, when a seed germinates, is it completely pre-programmed, or is there some kind of synchronicity? Does the seed emit a signal which is picked up by some great intelligence to help it do what it has to do? I mean, nature on its own just grows and grows and does what it has to do. Also, on the point of desire, Kath made me think about the first magical procedure which I carried out under the guidance of my grandmother. I don't think I could say there was any great desire there. I mean, I clearly wanted to be rid of the warts, but I think what was important is I had total faith in my grandmother. I mean, she wasn't a deity, but I had complete and utter faith in her, and I think that must have been part of the reason why it works, or why it worked. But also, as I said before, desire was a strong element in each of the 4 synchronicities which I mentioned. We've lost Sheen.
He's probably just nipped out for a comfort break.
Spot on. Well spotted. Yeah, nature called and I had to answer.
Oh, that's what happens.
Yeah. So, Brig, you have your hand up. I don't know whether you have said what you wanted to say while I was
No, not that, Shane. Robert, you have really triggered something here. Kath, Shane, Kristen, and Boris have all shared this stuff. And just very observations observations. With Shane, he talked about this church and the tree of life, and a woman. I would ask, was it a Templar church? But irrespective of that question, feminine divinity, something which the patriarchal lot that we've been subjected to, and still are subjected to, conveniently ignores. And of course, it is 50% of our journey, I would say. Boris talked about Gnosticism, an awareness, a connectivity, a one mind. I would say we're all different entities and have different journeys to seek our individual truths. But would you agree, Robert, that we do have help from different dimensions, for want of a better description? And for example, in the Masonic province of West Wales, a few of us have started what we call an esoteric group to inquire into the nature of the perennial wisdom, the ancient philosophy. And would you believe, I attended something from the Dormer Masonic circle recently, and happened to mention this in the discussion, and was contacted by a lady Freemason who wanted to inquire about the esoteric dimension of Freemasonry. And I think that here we are, albeit with limited number of souls, we're all certainly on the same page. And I have to tell you, Robert, I think you have really stimulated our taste buds here. So the question is, do you feel that we have help from different dimensions?
I definitely, as I said earlier on, I haven't started to address this, investigate it, if you want, in a structured and logical way. But I definitely think that is there. There are other synchronicities that have occurred which are very personal. I don't want to go into, but certainly I have faced in some ways you could call it, disaster in some ways it could be called, where things have happened to me which have saved me from my own end, in a way. So I definitely think, I can't put my finger on it structurally in terms of logical breakdown of those dimensions, but I definitely think that we are helped in multiple ways from multiple dimensions.
Robert, thank you so much for your candor, for your presentation, and such a stimulating discussion. Many thanks.
Thank you, Brig.
And likewise, thank you again, Brig. Greg, over to you, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's been a while since I've been able to join you all here, and it's so good to be back. And it's always interesting to me to get this sense of how the conversation flows and comes together as we address a topic. And there is a flow here. There's an energy here, right? Even in this space that's being created around this conversation. But I just wanted to comment, this thing that intrigues me is this kind of place that we're in between orchestration and desire. And are we getting help from other dimensions? Are we being moved around on a board? So many things have been said here, and I wonder, perhaps, I've come to think of it as a much more connected sort of thing. To me, I look at it and I think, really this is about energy, seeking energy, right? It's about vibration, seeking vibration. It's about what we resonating with other things out there. And I don't necessarily see that this division between dimensions or levels of experience. I think that it's all being experienced. It's all here, right? And perhaps when we are putting out a certain kind of energetic imprint, it's about energy finding energy, right? Sometimes that finds energy here on this plane. Sometimes it finds energy on another plane. Sometimes that energy finds us. It's a much more flowing, interconnected sort of thing, I think, that takes a while for those of us who perhaps grew up in sort of a Western European Occidental view of the world, you know, where we take things apart and we have to figure out how the mechanism works exactly and all of that. It's a different kind of model, right? And I think that's part of at least what I try to get my head around. And that brings in the whole thing about our desire. Where do we set our intention? Where do we set our desire? What are we actually creating? What are we actually manifesting? What are we drawing? What are we sending? That sort of thing. I mean, an absolutely fascinating discussion, but I think you know, a much more flowing sort of model than sometimes we imagine, a much more interconnected model. But thank you so much for bringing your paper and for initiating this discussion, Robert.
Greg, thank you so much. I really value what you just said there and what you shared with us. And I'd like to maybe suggest, so here we are having this wonderful discussion about synchronicity and intention, or our capacity maybe to make connections, form connections. And if we are having this discussion now, I wonder if we can maybe, in our own unique individual ways, let it be known that we are open to some kind of synchronous event to manifest for us within the next few days, and to see if anything may occur for any of us here present in this meeting within the next few days that would confirm that indeed that, if you like, that call or that communication and saying, yeah, I'm really open to some kind of synchronous event to take place. An example of a synchronous experience, synchronicity, which would then prove to me, like the hand of God saying, yep, here you go. So just a thought, I'd like to share that. I'm going to do that and see what happens. Kristen, over to you, please.
Okay, well, for me, many of my synchronous events had to do with Egypt. One of them, well, a couple I just wanted to share because they're kind of remarkable. But one, when we were really little, it just so happened that the first dog my mom got for us, it just so happened that my grandmother, her mother, was reading a book with an Egyptian doctor character. So Mom named our dog the name of that Egyptian doctor, Sinawe. So as I was growing up, there was an Egyptian doctor's name as a part of our family. And I took 2 trips to Egypt. And like I said, the synchronous events are so numerous, you know, including visitations and whatever. But one thing was remarkable. 3 days before my trips, one was November 1997, and November 2 years later, 1999. November 1997, 3 days before our trip, there was a massacre at Hatshepsut's tomb. It was like on CNN 24/7. Everyone, every tourist around the world canceled their trips except for ours. So and you know, okay, I'll just briefly mention this. So I get on this plane, this everyday plane from Detroit to New York, and sort of shaking in my boots, wondering if I made a bad choice in going. But it just so happened the man beside me was from Cairo on an ordinary flight to New York. And he worked as an engineer on Sinai. One of the highlights of our trip, we were landing in Cairo and we were going to climb Mount Sinai. But anyway, what I was saying is 3 days before our trip, there was this massacre. Everyone canceled their trip. And what happened was, this was an amazing blessing, because when you go to Egypt, the country, I found out, is normally packed. Every site is packed and noisy. And this time the country was empty except for the locals and us. We went into these sacred sites and temples. And for me, I had all these memories and could see things the way they were. And it was just amazing. So 2 years later, we were going again. I was going again. And so I just had this sort of whimsical thought, well, would something be happening again so that the conditions are like this again? And sure enough, 3 days before we left, Egypt Air crashed. And it was the same thing all over. So what kind of synchronicities are those? It was just amazing. So that was it.
Thank you, Kristen. I mean, that's extraordinary. And for many people, that would have been true tragedy. And yet, in your case, on the other side of the experience, it caused something very personal and profound for you.
Right, right.
Yeah, thank you. Any comments on that, Robert?
No, I'm just in listening mode. No.
Okay, then over to you, Barry.
Firstly, thank you, Robert. What an amazing, stimulating sort of conversation you brought to the forum. It's really awesome. What occurred to me, and thank you so eloquently play what you said, Greg. It was sort of what I would like to have said myself. It was so beautifully expressed. But what came to mind was, when we think of the multi-dimensions in terms of connecting with the various rays from the divine, is what the shaman have done for centuries, and what magicians have done for centuries. Whether we do a ceremony to Venus or the sun or to Jesus or whatever, we do a ceremony to connect with the divine, and then observe the effect that presents itself to us afterwards. And so, like Kath was saying about the hawks flying across the window in the Temple of Jupiter. Is to observe what is what turns up in the corresponding nature of the intent that was set. And as we know, the map of the Tree of Life and the Kabbalah, which each sphere has its various correspondences. Netzach, you have the Venus silver birch, and and various other, and Tiferet, you have the dove, and various other things that appear in the natural world that speak to us from the divine. And so when desire or intent is set in motion, as the shaman have done, looking for the signs. And then that leads to the understanding there's no separation between the human condition and what manifests before unfolding before us. And so for me, I was just sort of trying for my own pace is to connect more and more with this phenomena of synchronicity. If I have a question, to see what does actually turn up in my environment. Yeah. And we're so fortunate in our peer group that that the ancients have actually given us a whole set of correspondences in accordance with whether it be mineral, animal, vegetable, or mineral. The divine can speak directly to us in our human condition. And for me, is to actually, what I've been trying to practice is to be observing as the shaman do, and so on. So just a thought there. So absolutely awesome subject, Robert. Thanks for bringing it along. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry. I completely agree with your point there about our ability, if we train it, to listen or to observe more closely the potential signs and communications that may be presenting or attempting to present themselves to us for us to learn certain things. But it's a matter of us developing our capacity to listen and to understand clearly what we're listening to. Because we can hear something or listen to it, but it doesn't mean to say we understand what we're listening to.
May I just add an example to that? I asked asked a particular time to have some healing to come along. Send me a spirit of harmony and healing, and who turned up? But within a few hours was a chap called Michael, and I'd actually thought of the Archangel Michael, and this person was called Michael, and he was an absolutely amazing healer who did like supercharged Reiki upon me to the extent that there was a flash of light in the room when he was working on me. And so, yeah, I was just to say, what be observant. But most people would have made the connection. Oh, why is he called Michael? You know, and it's so easy to actually take for granted and overlook what's directly in front of our faces. You know. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again, Barry. Brig, over to you again.
Yeah, thank you. Robert, would it be constructive for any of us that have attended your excellent presentation to actually jot down our particular experiences of synchronicities in our lives to you?
Brig, I would find that very, very interesting. And in fact, I think I think Sheen's idea of going away from the meeting with our minds focused on looking for a synchronistic event. Yeah, I think there's much research that needs to be done into this. That might be a starting point. Maybe we could get in contact after this meeting.
Yeah, absolutely superb, Robert. Many thanks, and I will work on it in the next few days.
Great, that sounds great.
Thank you, Brig and Robert. I would suggest then that if by chance any of us do encounter an example of synchronicity appearing in the next few weeks,
yeah,
we would jot that information down and reconvene at a later date and share these experiences.
I like that idea, Sheen. Definitely like that idea. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, let's do so. Boris, over to you again, Boris. Hello, Boris.
Sorry for that.
That's it.
Yeah, I have to declare a case of synchronicity as we speak, because my brother is in Egypt, and he just sent me a photo of pyramids to Kirsten's point, and he just
Wonderful.
said, "I'd love to talk to you tomorrow," because he has some amazing experience from Egypt. So, first one up. I just want to touch on a little bit on synchronicity and quantum physics. As I mentioned, my father was a very early quantum physicist. He was a Manchester PhD. He studied in UK, in France, Australia. He taught as well, and he was among the first physicists who tried to explain quantum entanglement from a theoretical point of view. And for years, this was not a fringe thing, but it was a little bit of a theoretical thing. And only recently, I think 2 years ago, 3 scientists got the Nobel Prize for proving entanglement, quantum entanglement, experimentally. So, I think my father, who is passed away 15 years ago, would have been thrilled that this is really becoming mainstream science today, because they were a bit of spooky guys in the late 70s. He was like a second generation of quantum physicist. But if we look at to my knowledge, the term synchronicity was coined by C.J. Jung, I think at the same time probably when quantum physics started, which is the beginning of last century. So it's an interesting synchronicity itself. And I think, for many of us who experienced, and many people in the world who experienced synchronicity, and secretly were in love with C.J. Jung, who especially with the Red Book coming, was seen by many of, yes, as a scientist and a psychologist and a father of many, many kind of new things, but also somebody who was a little bit, borderline, too much esoteric for mainstream science. I think nothing was happening with the synchronicity concept over decades. That's at least my personal feeling. It was just like we secretly would say, synchronicity and deja vu. All of a sudden, with quantum physics and quantum entanglement, there is a big chance that this becomes really part of something. I see this was actually right all along, because my father had a very close colleague who passed away a couple of months ago, and his son became a quantum physicist. He's now in Canada. He's quite advanced. I mean, I went to banking and finance, and I went into the non-academic route. But I met this close friend of mine, who is as I said, son of my father's best friend. And I asked him a little bit like, so what's happening with this quantum entanglement lately? Tell me what's happening in your physics circles. And he told me something that I didn't know, that these experiments of quantum entanglement, which basically means in a very kind of simple terms, you give a spin to an electron, and you spin the other one in a similar spin, and then you start separating them, and you change the spin, and the spin of the other changes instantly. And we always thought that this was something like very close distances, and apparently there were Chinese scientists have managed to kind of make this. I don't know if I'm saying something that you all know, but for me this was a wow moment, that they managed to do it for over, I think, 1,000-kilometer distance now with lasers. So might as well be explaining certain things in the universe. And for me, that was like mind blowing, because there is a chance finally that somehow science and spirituality would slowly, I'm a huge fan of bringing science and spirituality together. But my father, when I was a teenager, gave me a book, The Tao of Physics, which for me was like, opened the whole field for me. My father was a hardcore scientist, but he loved transcendental meditation. He was open to Eastern philosophy, Taoism, not very deep, but he was open. So I went the other route through spirituality and esotericism, our SRA, etc., and other things. But I think finally we have a chance to somehow, if not bridge the gap, at least you reduce this quantum space a little bit. And I really hope. I mean, I asked him, for example, the quantum entanglement. Are we only talking about subatomic particles, or can we move it actually to molecules? Because if we move it to molecules, then we start being very close to reality. And he said before it was a no-go thing, but certain experiments are going into the direction that maybe on a higher level it might be possible to prove it as well. So I think now that the Nobel Prize was given, I'm sure there'll be a lot of funding, because in science, money is spent only on topics which are hot and which can achieve global recognition. I'm sure there will be a new wave of popularity in quantum physics, and yeah, I'm sure my dad is pleased somewhere up there in the quantum field.
Doris, thanks once again for sharing that. I find that subject fascinating. and the interconnectedness of consciousness. Very fascinating subject. Kath, you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
I was just reminded at the end of the last speaker's comment of I'm fascinated to discover, by the way, that they've done quantum entanglement to such a distance. I had no idea. So I'm really quite thrilled about that. But the thing that I remembered was some experiments that were done by somebody freezing water and observing the crystals, the formation of the crystals and the shapes that they make, and putting labels on the containers. So he'd put a label reading love on a container full of water and freeze it, and the crystals would be beautiful and harmonious and everything that you could wish for. And then he did one with a label saying hate, and the crystals were horrible, all fragmented and disharmonious and really messy, which is quite a demonstration of the importance of intent, quite apart from the idea of electrons influencing other electrons, thoughts influencing solid matter. It's all magic. It's wonderful. And thank you for this discussion. It's been really inspiring.
I have a good friend who duplicated that experiment just to see what would happen.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it happened exactly as the scientist you're describing.
Yeah.
She labeled them with certain things, and then each day would pour that emotion toward that particular label.
Yeah.
And it absolutely altered how they reacted and responded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shane, can I just say, I used to love that experiment. I was in love with it, but then there were people who kind of debunked it and said it's pseudoscience. So which made me really sad. I'm sure the water reacted to my sadness. But then I saw a beautiful experiment. I don't know if you've seen it with vibrations, where I forgot the name of the scientist. He puts sand on a metal plate and then plays a certain frequency.
Yeah, cymatics, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Which I think we can all try, right? Even with a you know, with the violin. How do you call it? Sorry. Bow, exactly. You can run a bow by the metal plate and you get the same effect. So I think this gave me back hope that, you know, at the beginning there was a word and where it was actually a frequency, and it could be that the whole universe is kind of came of shape because of this incredible initial.
There are physicists, aren't there, who say it's all frequencies.
There's a wonderful. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on, please, Kath. Sorry.
No, that's it. You know, just everything is a matter of frequency.
There's a wonderful book I was introduced to years ago called Nada Brahma, The World is Sound. And it's all about that, about vibration and sound. And that everything in creation is an expression of that.
Yeah. In the beginning was the word. Yeah.
Which means if everything is a frequency, our synchronicity is a song.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
I really love that.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Boris. So, Robert, anything maybe you would like to say, unless anybody has anything else they'd like to contribute? We don't have hands up in the reactions at the moment. Anybody maybe at the Atlantis bookstore, if you'd like to comment or ask questions or anything, then
say thank you very much for this organized coincidence.
I like that too. Robert?
Yeah, Jean, can I just thank you for the privilege of allowing me to present my paper. It's I found the richness of the conversation phenomenal, and it's given me a stack of ideas. I guess in my mind I had the notion that I'd present the paper and then put the thing to bed, but it's already set me on thinking on ideas for new paths. So
Yeah.
I hope we can take this somewhere in the future.
I absolutely agree with you. What a wonderful conversation this sparked. So yeah, thank you on behalf of the Metropolitan Study Group of the SRIA. Robert, thank you so much for your presentation today. And yeah, we all wish you a full and speedy recovery. Rest
Thank
well
you.
and recover well.
Thank you very much indeed.
And there's no such thing as an accident.
That's right.
So turn it into an opportunity.
That's right.
Yeah, loads of love to everybody. I'm just going to switch the view here to the gallery view for the purpose of the recording, so we can see everybody on the screen. Yeah, great to see you all, and yeah, have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever time of day or night it may be. Lots and lots of love to you all. Take good care, and we will return on the third Saturday in October. I won't be present at that meeting. I'll be otherwise engaged at that particular time. So the meeting will be taking place, but it will be hosted by somebody else for that particular meeting. So yeah, I wish you all well. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Lots of love to everybody.
Very much again, Robert.
Lots of love to everybody. Thank you, Sheen. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.